Wonderful. Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Rebirth Online Retreat, where we are igniting our age of empowerment, owning who we truly are, gaining clarity of direction so that we can take that soul-aligned action with joy, grace, and ease. This morning, I have the immense pleasure of being joined by Adele Wimsett. Adele is a women's health practitioner supporting women from menarche to menopause, where she bridges the gap between science and woo, and we love a lot of woo, to support women in harmonizing their hormones. Adele, loving having you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. It's lovely to be doing this with you.
Oh, awesome. So today we're going to be touching on a really important topic, mental health and hormones. And I know from my own journey, how mental health and menopause, mental health and menopause. And I know from my own journey how much I was affected by the shift and change in my hormones. And even before I knew I was sort of entering menopause, I kind of went to the doctor and said, something's not right. Um, and I think it's a really important topic, and we are starting to talk about it more. But can you explain a little bit more for the viewers how menopause really can affect our mental health?
Hugely.
Yeah.
Okay. And I feel very firmly that this is a topic we aren't speaking about enough. And had women been allowed to be involved in the early development of medicine, the way we approach mental health across the board of a woman's life cycle would be very different. And I think we reduce hormones. And the reason for that is this inextricable link between the hormones and neurotransmitters.
Mm.
So hormones sensitize neurotransmitters. So my niche within the hormones world is ADHD and hormones. And what I love to look at is the role that estrogen and progesterone play on sensitizing some of the neurotransmitters like estrogen and progesterone. The neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. Sorry, I'm day 27 of my cycle. So low on estrogen, low on progesterone. So this might happen and we're just going to roll with it.
We're going to go with it. It's perfect. Perfect.
It's this impact. So estrogen sensitizes dopamine and serotonin. Progesterone sensitizes something called GABA, which is very calming. So like progesterone is like Valium for the nervous system for most women. And actually the nervous system can't properly regulate without the presence of progesterone for women. And I'm
Mm.
not talking about synthetic progestins. They're very different and do the opposite quite often. They're things like are found in the marina coil and contraceptives. I'm talking about natural body made or body identical progesterones. And I'm just going to share a quick image with you actually, because I think it will be
Perfect.
helpful. Our brain is covered in estrogen and progesterone receptors. Okay, so this is a woman's brain.
Okay.
And what we have here are parts of the brain that are covered in receptors for these hormones. Now, if a cell has a receptor on it, it means it depends on that hormone to do its job properly. Okay, so we can see things like executive function, cognitive function, mood regulation, sleep, word retrieval, all of these things that just simply don't have these powerful biochemicals in the body to make them work. And if we look at what's happening hormonally, through the different life seasons, from menarche, early 20s usually, up until mid 30s, late 30s, we're seeing fairly high levels of estrogen and progesterone. Then in phase one of perimenopause, we see progesterone drop off a cliff. So when we're talking about, it being Valium for the nervous system, quite often the first signs of menopause are actually starting to feel a bit anxious about things, finding
Mm.
yourself getting a bit more overwhelmed about things than you used to. Women often say, I'm not an anxious person, but I'm feeling anxious. I'm worrying
Mhm.
about things I never used to.
Mhm.
Life just feeling a little bit harder to just get through the list, all the strategies that we use to complete our never-ending to-do list. It just feels a bit harder, and sleep can get disrupted as well because of the lower progesterone. But estrogen stays quite high. And then what happens is estrogen, as this progesterone continues to decline, the second phase of perimenopause, we've seen estrogen kind of having a party by herself. Sometimes she's really, really high. Sometimes she's crashing low. So you can have symptoms of both. That's really fun. And then eventually, as we go into menopause, the estrogen has lowered off in phase two and everything balances back out again at the lower end. So does that explain the role of the
Yeah,
hormones in terms of mental health.
it does. It does. And I know, just as you described, sort of feeling overwhelmed, more overwhelmed than I had before. And, you and I have spoken about this, having anxiety in the middle of the night. I was like, why am I waking up feeling anxious? This is so weird in my sleep. So I totally understand that. And I know quite a lot of the women that I speak to, also have these symptoms and don't understand where they come from. And so how, in your experience, what do you do when you see women coming into your clinic and they're having all of these symptoms? What are some of the ways that you help them to sort of balance that out?
I mean, first I want to acknowledge this is a huge topic, right? That we
Mhm,
could probably speak about all week. But I think the first and most powerful thing is to completely validate a woman's experience, which
mhm,
we cannot underestimate because quite often, particularly by the time I see them in my clinic, they have been gaslit and offered SSRIs for mental health and
mhm,
sleeping tablet. And a woman in her truth, in her feminine intuition and intelligence is going, I haven't got a mental health problem. But because there's nothing else available, it's like, okay, I'll try this. So then we're getting misdiagnoses, we're getting poor management, the incorrect medication. We're then trying strategies that we see from very well-meaning practitioners of like affirmations and meditating, which are great, but they're not going to deal with the fact that there is this biological deficiency of this
mhm,
powerful biochemical in your body. Okay. Menopause is this recalibration of everything. The brain is recalibrating over time. But the problem is, and this, I guess, is for me a bit more of the spiritual side of menopause, is that we're not living in alignment in communities and tribe the way we should be, that
mhm,
would allow for this transition and a change of role within how we show up in our culture.
mhm.
So I will bring this back to your question, but what we're doing is we're trying to still show up like we did in our 20s and 30s and even our early 40s,
Yeah.
and then feeling like we're failing at that. And then the inner critic gets really loud because we don't have that lovely estrogen and progesterone to help us go, no, 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 it's okay, rationalize it and make us feel good. So we can feel really alone in our experience and internalizing this
Mhm,
emotional and mental and spiritual experience of menopause, where we just keep trying to be the maiden and the mother, when what we're being called to do is use different strengths, which we can
mhm.
come on to. But to answer your question, the first thing I do is validate a woman's experience,
Yeah.
make sure we're really looking at what is the season and what's going on. We're not meant to feel like we did at 22. That's not what's meant to happen. So we have to deconstruct some of our beliefs around this in
Wow.
order for us to surrender to the power of this season. So there's that element, but I also want to get really nerdy and look at what's happening with your cortisol, your HPA axis, the stress response, your blood sugar regulation, your thyroid, your gut, your liver, like all of these things are going to be impacting how the hormones are affecting your unique physiology and therefore how you feel. So that's how I would address it. That's where I say I kind of bridge the two. Does
And
that
I
answer?
Yeah, it does, and I love this beautiful, excuse me, holistic approach, looking at the physiological changes and how we address this, but also, the experience, the spiritual experience that a woman is having. And you mentioned, and all of the stuff that you're mentioning, yeah, absolutely. I have definitely experienced that. But for women, and I know a lot of women are experiencing this sort of inner critic. So as they sort of begin to step out into this new phase of life, a lot of times they kind of, this kind of self-doubt can emerge and things like that. And so you mentioned something really interesting there about when the hormones aren't balancing out, the inner critic can really kind of surface. Can you touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, where this happens, and when we're in this, whether it be perimenopause or menopause, remember we've been here before,
Mm,
because the hormonal balance usually during this time is very similar to the luteal, so our premenstrual phase, and menstruation. What's
mhm,
happening hormonally is very similar to those phases, but obviously it's extended. So this is we're not unfamiliar with this. We're just unfamiliar with the consistency and some of the erraticness, particularly during peri. So this season for us is is where the estrogen is low,
mhm,
So we're not getting the support of dopamine and serotonin, which is lifting our mood and making us go, wait a minute, everything's okay. We're not getting the soothing benefit of the progesterone to calm our nervous system when we're like, what did I say in that conversation when we wake at 3 a.m. in the morning going, oh my God, does she hate me? What did I, like, oh my God, what's going on with me? We just don't have that to help us. So what happens is, particularly low estrogen causes a racing mind, right? So quite
Mm,
often women are like I literally can't, what's going on in my brain? It's like a runway. Um, we can't control it.
mm,
Okay. So then what happens? We can get stuck in these thought loops that we're going round and round with this. And you're like, oh, what did you do that for? And it can really make us isolate ourselves, socially alienate ourselves, when actually our nervous system wants us to tend and befriend when we're in a dysregulated state. We want to be in circle. We want to be in community.
mm,
We want to have that co-regulation, but we just can't because of all these things. This noise is saying inside of our head, and yet we don't have the spaces, generally are not accessible to most women, to go, I need to process this,
yeah.
I need to pause on life a minute and step into this cave of reflection. So what is going on here? So many women lose their identity in this season of life. I often
Mm,
say, I don't even know who the F I am in this season. Like, what's
yeah.
going on with me? So there's so much to unpick, where we want to be called into this inner reflection, our intuitive abilities, like, ping on, our psychic abilities ping on. They're much more, these gifts, these aspects of the feminine are so much more powerful in this season of our life, but they're not revered by our culture,
Yeah.
right? What is revered are the maiden and the mother aspects of us. We're great when we're doing things and looking after everybody because our endocrinology, our hormones are supporting that. But as they fade off, we're called to be inward. In our tribes, we would have been space holders. We would have been the wisdom seekers. We'd been the intuitives, bringing this knowledge in, and we would have been valued for that. But there's no space
Ah,
largely in our culture for it. So therefore, it's like, where do I go with this? What do I do? Because my gifts aren't in alignment with what society wants from me. And we might not be aware of that on a conscious level, but definitely the messaging we are constantly bombarded with about where we sit has an impact on our emotional mental health.
oh, and you've touched on something so important there, about the abilities that really start to come online in this phase of life. And I know, and in my own experience and in the women that I work with, something does switch on, these abilities, these gifts that are not necessarily valued in the larger space, but there's a really important kind of sense and vibration of power that starts to come online. And when you have women that come to you, how do you help them to sort of balance things out in this kind of later stage of life and accept the sort of things, the gifts that are starting to happen?
Oh, this is the work, right? I mean, how sick are we all of hearing that? I know I was like, I've been doing the work for decades. Don't tell me to do anymore. But do you know what? I think sometimes it's just shining a light on it and
Mm,
acknowledging it, that we are not small men. We are not linear creatures. We are cyclical beings, like the moon, like the earth. We go through different seasons. And we live in this world that expects us to show up the same every single day, not only just of our menstruating cycle, but of our life cycles. We're still expected to show up like we did in our 20s when we're in our 50s. That's just utterly ridiculous.
yeah,
We're not, that is society's unsaid expectation on
yeah,
us. So it's beginning the conversation. It's acknowledging this. It's given a woman permission to say, that's not me anymore. We have conversations quite often around boundaries. For me, that is a superpower of this season. We have to be so discerning with our physical energy because it's not the same as it was, our capacity. And therefore, we have to become really discerning about where we spend that. And also, where are these energetic leaks?
mm,
Where are we? Women hold on to relationships out of obligation because we're taught to be nice and good girls, right? But when we look, I bet every woman watching this, you can look in your diary and go, oh, it's that thing or that person. This is a surrender it. This is not that season. Release that person. It doesn't have to be this negative experience. It's just surrender and release it. because that gives you more energy for the things that nourish you and build you up. Often women are hitting this season of their life completely depleted. Their
Mm,
adrenals are often exhausted, and therefore they're not able to pick up the slack of producing estrogen and progesterone like they need to. They're often nutrient deficient. Their gut microbiome's over the place. They're doing awful practices that they think are healthy for them, like aggressive fasting, restricting macronutrients like carbs out of their diet or fat out of their diet. They're doing fasted exercise. They're just depleting and depleting. We've got this belief that to feel well, we have to work really hard
mm,
to do that. And no, we don't. We just need a softness and a gentleness and a kindness to our body that has given us the gift to reach this season, and to really look at what do I need now? What is my need? Not it's what everybody else's need. That's your mother's season.
yeah.
Everybody else. What do I need right now in order for me to feel great during this season of my life? What does my life need to look like? And that's going to look different for every woman. But
Yeah.
it is not ping ponging around everywhere, hitting the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, starving yourself and having 200 calories a day. That is not what your body needs in this season. You know, we need to let go of all the BS that has been pumped into us that we might not even know is there, particularly as we were, in the 80s, judging where fat's the devil. No, it's not. The right fats are your best friend.
Mm.
It's unpicking all of this. Sugar's your friend as well, but the right type in balance. It was just look after yourself, nourish yourself, nothing harsh, restrictive, taking away. No.
Oh, I love that. Inviting in the softness, inviting in the
Mm.
stillness, boundaries,
Yeah.
huge, and where
Yeah.
the energy leads, and being able to say and being able to ask what feels good to me right now, which,
Mhm.
sometimes we're not very good at. We're not really good at receiving or the
Yeah.
stillness. This is the invitation. And that's
Yeah.
why I feel so strongly about this retreat and, this messaging that and as you say, we've been given the gift of reaching this phase of life, and we really should embrace it and welcome it. I'm having the best time ever. I feel, personally that this is the best I've ever been, and I really want other people, other women to feel that as well. Um, so, Adele, if we were to summarize all of the wonderful things that you've said today, and I could honestly talk to you for hours, and we have talked for hours on many occasions, but I could talk to you for hours about this. What would be three takeaways that our audience should walk away with today?
Always such a hard thing when someone asks this question because I want to reel it all off. Okay. I think there's something around the permission to meet your own needs. And that's not an easy thing to do. But I think if that is difficult for you, that is a non negotiable part of this process
Mhm.
of giving yourself permission to say, who am I and what do I need at this point? I think boundaries, because this is something generally women are not taught to be good at. And I think from a biological, my nerdy bit on here is honor your adrenals and your blood sugar regulation. If you can focus on that, you are going to probably eradicate about 75% of symptoms if you have them. You
Ooh,
know, that's what I would suggest. I could give
amazing.
you hundreds.
Amazing, amazing. We need another conversation just about that. So if women want to get in contact with you, if they want to know more, if they want to dig a little bit deeper into what I think is like one of the most important topics, how do they get in contact with you?
You can come hang out with me on Instagram. I love speaking to people on there. But if you want to find out, I've got lots of resources, free and otherwise, on my website. I do discovery calls. I run a virtual clinic and an in-person menopause clinic in Marlow in Buckinghamshire, if you're local to that. But I work with women all around the world. So I run a virtual clinic the rest of the time.
Beautiful. And what's your website address?
Harmonizeyou.co.uk. Yeah, I'm not on Instagram with my name. I'm Harmonize You.
And it's harmonized with an S, not a Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
harmonizeyou.co.uk. Beautiful. Adele, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm buzzing. Thank you so, so much for this beautiful and amazing and important information. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Love you. Thank you for having
Love
me.
you.